So as somebody that's like just starting out, you're taking something maybe that you're not super passionate about. What's a good way to, I guess, discipline yourself, forcing yourself into something just to kind of get your career started, how to deal with that?
Daniel, it's so good for you to join today. I'd love to know what has been some of your favorite content of mine so far. It could be a YouTube video, something you've read, or anything of the nature. I'd love to hear.
Yeah, so I actually got into your community through Udemy, and I think that was honestly super beneficial for me. I got in through that, and then the Discord server I think was probably the most beneficial. But apart from that, the YouTube videos have also been it's been kind of the whole thing as a package, I guess. But mostly I'd say Udemy is kind of what got me kick started. So that's been kind of something I hold near and dear because it was kind of what got me into this, and stuff that's just kind of, I wouldn't say blown up, but I'm starting to dig real deep into it. So I kind of owe a lot of it to that for sure.
Well, that's so good to hear. Have you noticed any changes in your composition career as a result of that?
There's very little that's monetary at this point, but I mean, I just started my first gig with, it's my friend's, he owns his own video game business thing. He makes puzzle games. So I just started the first album for one of his puzzle games, and he paid me up front. So that was like my first real monetary thing. So I guess definitely in that, but it's been a very obvious progression of my musical abilities, I guess, as far as what I've done. And there's like a lot of things on the horizon that's kind of all coming to fruition now because of it. So it's kind of like in the near future, there's going to be things happening.
That's amazing. I loved hearing that. Yeah. Everyone has to build that foundation, and then you can scale the actual business.
Totally.
So I'm glad you're here. How can I help you today?
Kind of where I'm at now is taking the shotgun approach. So I'm doing, like, I've got a music pack that I'm going to be releasing soon, kind of just waiting on the album art from my artist. And then I've got the gig with Fine Tune Music. So I have a couple of songs with them, which is more of like the TV based music composing. And then I'm doing my whole buddy's album, like I said, for his video game, which is a completely different style puzzle game music. So I guess apart from that, though, I've been doing a lot of music on the side. I think that would be more geared towards film composing. It's more what I'm best at as far as like piano / orchestral stuff. That's kind of more my forte. So I guess like my first question is like, so I know I have like the Fine Tune Music, who they asked for a couple songs, but apart from that, like it'd be cool to start kind of releasing some things to the public, and I'm not sure what that looks like. So my thought is maybe start releasing things to Spotify. And I know there's not going to be like a huge market for piano orchestral music, but there is a little bit there for people that just want to listen. And so my first question would be like, do you think Spotify would be a good place to put piano / orchestral music? And then the marketability, would it be, so I've got like Instagram and Facebook, I have all these social media platforms, but I'm not sure if it's like, because those are all personal accounts and they have like a decent following of friends and whatnot. And I'm not sure if I want to like overload them with all of a sudden turning into like, I am now a composer and like, now this is the page you're following, or if I need to like split off and make a different Instagram account and kind of advertise it from my personal account or something like that. I guess, yeah, just thoughts on that.
Okay. So that's a lot of questions in one. I'll try.
Yeah.
Let's pick on one piece of that. So it sounds like you have a lot of options in front of you, and you're trying to get some clarity about where to go next. Right?
Sure. Yeah.
And then the second part of your question is about marketing and how to grow your audience and that kind of thing. So let's hit on the first one. So it sounds like you already have a body of work. You've already been working on some music that you want to sell or you want to stream. So I'm a really big proponent of putting as little effort as possible to get the largest investment, to get the most result. Call that the 80-20 principle. It's when you spend 20% of your time, energy, and resources to get 80% of the return. So it's obviously a multiplication effect versus additive. So your time is very precious. It's very limited. So even here at the beginning of your career, it's important to use your time wisely. So any activities that you can do that will help to line up with multiple goals is going to help you get there faster. So good news is you already have a bunch of music that you can do something with. So my recommendation is to go ahead and put them on game music packs for game stuff. Use that same music and sell it on iTunes and Bandcamp or any place that you can license the music for people to use. And there's also the streaming side. So if you're familiar with SoundDrop, it's one of the many sites out there that you can upload, and you can actually do it for free. If you have original music, we'll take a small cut on the back end, but your music will go to all those different platforms, and you can use the same asset to make 5 different income sources, which is very, very powerful. And every time you write a piece of music, you should be putting it to work. And even if it's not, it doesn't even have to be paid. It could be free, right? You could give it away as part of a lead magnet, as a pack or something to get people into your email list.
How would I use, I guess, social media as, I guess, the marketing aspect would be the next portion.
Well, you asked a good question there about, you made the delineation between a personal and business account. Here's my stance on it. You are your brand, especially as an entrepreneur and as a freelancer. You are the brand. And so I don't think you necessarily need to change who you are or change the way that you market yourself or present yourself, unless you were to go and open up an actual company. So for example, I've been doing this for about 16 years, so I'm not super fresh at it. But when I started, and really up until a couple of years ago, all I've ever done is the Stephen Melin brand, which at the time was exclusively just writing music. And over time, that snowballed to where I was also teaching on the side, and that has kind of formed its own entity. So it makes sense for me to have a separate account, a separate website, separate web presence, separate sales and marketing and email lists, and all of the things that come with business. It's its own thing now. And likewise, I've done the same thing. I started creating sample instruments, gave them away for free, and then it snowballed over time over the last year or so. Now it's become its own sample instrument company called Simple Samples Audio. And so now, same thing. It has its own email list, its own sales, its own website, social media accounts. So to me, that's a natural progression over time. But at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, do you want the brand name to be what people know and trust, or is it a person? And as a service professional, it's the person, right? People want to work with Daniel Keating. They don't want to work with, I don't know, Raven Wolf Studios or whatever, like pick some random name. There's an uphill battle whenever you put a name, a company name in front of the brand. It's actually more work. It is harder for me to sell sample instruments through Simple Samples Audio because it's not this well-established, trusted brand. I'm still the face of the company, and I'm still having to do all of this extra work because I have to break down the barrier. Versus when people hear the name Stephen Melin, like they've come across me in so many different ways. They might come across my Spotify album for video game piano covers that I did 10 years ago, but that might be the rabbit trail that leads them to any of the other resources that I've done. And this is the whole beauty of online business, is that you can put something out once and then it's going to continue to generate revenue, but it's also going to continue to generate your audience. It's going to draw people in from different places. And that's why my branding and marketing has been all over the place, and I'll admit that, for better or worse. And honestly, I don't even know if it's positive or negative at this stage. I'm not sure I've been doing it long enough to even understand the macro picture of what is the best way. I don't know if there is a best way. But I know that my journey has taken me to multiple avenues, and I can sleep at night with peace because I know that I'm doing the best that I know how to do right now in this time frame, and I'm making the best decisions towards those goals. And this is why I preach and I stand on my soapbox all day about this whole idea of choose something. There's 100 things you could do. Choose something and do it for 6 months. And that way you'll give it a real chance to grow and to mature if it is something that you need to continue doing. But the good thing is you also have that backdoor escape that after 6 months, if it's just not a good idea or it didn't quite have the results you wanted, okay, you either need to pour more gasoline on the fire to make it better and revise, or just ditch it completely and go back to the drawing board. And I honestly, for the limited number of successes I've had in business, there's way more failures. And I think you're going to hear that across the board with any professional. I've tried a lot of products. I've tried a lot of selling tactics and whatever. I've made a lot of courses that flopped. I've made courses that have been extremely successful. I've made music tracks that have landed, and you're going to find this out with Fine Tune Audio. Your first track could make you $100,000, or it could be the 100th track or the 300th track. You don't know. No one knows, because it's such a wave. Like, there's so much going on. There's so many factors. To the end of the day, put everything you can out into the marketplace, because it can only make you money. But then on the other side, as far as personal, like, I don't think you have any reason to brand yourself as some company. Just continue being you, because that's why people hire you anyway. Because of your interests, because of your specific unique characteristics and what you're interested in. And I something that I've found as well is, I'm reading a book right now called Book Yourself Solid. You might enjoy that. It's this big workbook that it has you kind of analyzing each little criteria about what type of clients do you want, what kind of products do you want to make, and it just kind of analyzes this whole process. And something I've been reflecting on a lot lately is, I've noticed that whether or not I work on a video game is not actually the thing that is my goal. I love working on games, but I also really love working on these other types of projects too. But I have found that there is something that is at the core of who I am. You can kind of tell from my background, it should be super obvious. I love video games. And what I've noticed is my favorite clients, whether they're filmmakers or TV producers or podcast creators, they all love video games too. And it's like this core interest that I have, that if I'm trying to work with someone who has nothing in common with me, who can't geek out about Zelda music or whatever, it just gets really hard and there's a lot of resistance. And so that's something that I've even written down, like, people I work with have to love video games. And what that does is that narrows down my output, which is why on social media, if I'm going to make a funny post or something, it's going to organically come out of this. Hey, look, I'm like my sample instrument stuff. I'm going to be playing goofy video game tunes on the keyboard, even though I'm selling something different, because that's the core of my personality. So I really, to sum it all up, I know that was a lot there, but to sum it all up, keep being you, and you're going to attract like-minded people. You're going to attract people who love the same things as you. And it could be anything. It doesn't have to be music related at all. If there's a certain sport you love, if there's a certain team you love, if there's a certain activity or whatever, keep being authentically you. And that's what branding is. You've been doing it all along.
So as somebody that's like just starting out, like 6 months into the world of composing, I guess, it's more of like, I'm going to kind of take whatever opportunity comes my way. So especially with the game I'm doing right now, it's a puzzle game, and there's going to be like 4 different worlds. So we want 4 different tracks with kind of different feels, but it's all very ambient, undistracting. Is that a word? Not distracting music. That's what I've noticed. Kind of what you were hitting on is like, it's maybe not necessarily like a character thing, but like a part of me that doesn't really click with the music, like the kind of music I'm making. So I'm finding it really difficult to get myself into this music, because I think when I write, like, it comes from a place that is like who I am, is like what comes out in the music. And that's when I, like, it's easy. It's like, it kind of flies out, as opposed to like when I'm forcing myself into like this ambient music where it's really weak on the melody, like just very tinkly, very undistracting melody. I'm finding it really difficult. So my next question was kind of a specific one. Like, if you're taking, especially because, I'm just trying to take what I can get at this point to start out. If you're taking something maybe that you're not super passionate about, like, what's a good way to, I guess, discipline yourself? Or even if you have like specific advice on creating ambient music, because we want like a 40-minute album, which is tough. 4 different like 10-minute tracks ish. Just tough to do. Even just a 10-minute track that's not repetitive and not distracting. So any kind of advice towards, I guess, the personal aspect of like forcing yourself into something just to kind of get your career started, like how to deal with that. And then if you have like any musical advice for ambient music that's not distracting, because I'm definitely an over composer, when this is like the opposite of over composing.
That's a great question, because that's a real challenge that you've kind of gotten yourself into.
Mm-hmm.
Something I've realized recently, and it's not something that I discovered, it's something that one of my clients told me. He hired me for a game soundtrack and meanwhile fired me from writing ambient music because he said, Steven, you're one of the best melodic composers I've ever met, but you suck at ambient music. Thank you, I guess. And so here's what he literally did. He said, I'm going to hire you for all of the melodic tracks, which is like 90% of the soundtrack. But I'm going to hire this other guy for the ambient music because he just oozes that stuff. He is passionate about that stuff. He's inspired by that. And then I've even listened to his stuff and I'm like, yeah, he's perfect for this. And we've actually become friends and we actually work together now on projects. And it's very fascinating. This is not something that I would have ever called myself, but now that I look back, yeah, I'm extremely influenced by melodic music. And that's what I listen to. That's what I've always been influenced by. And there are people on the opposite side of the spectrum too, who excel at ambient music, and good for them. That's a different style. So while as composers, we wear a lot of hats, you don't have to take on projects. And I'll even encourage you not to take on projects that don't magnify your strengths. I know a lot of times we hear in the entrepreneurship world I think some of the worst advice people can give young freelancers of any job description. One of the worst pieces of advice is to work on your weaknesses. And you hear that a lot because that's kind of what people sell in education on. Hey, come take a degree in this subject because you're going to need it, right? Come learn middleware because you're going to need it in game audio, which is not true, by the way. Come learn scripting, come learn program, like these things that are kind of ancillary. They're secondary, tertiary tasks and skill sets, but it's not true. Instead, I would say quite the opposite. Focus on your strengths because everybody has one or two core strengths. And if you milk those, you're going to pave a very successful career. And then what you can do is if an opportunity comes and you need to solve a problem that you're not skilled at, that's when you should surround yourself and hire and outsource and grab assistant work for the other jobs. So for example, I don't do sound design. I don't do sound effects. I've tried it. I'm terrible at it. And I know that even with 10,000 hours of mastery, I still would not be at the same level as composition. I'm built for composition. I think in this way. It's effortless. It's everything you said. It's inspiring. It's creative. So I'm going to double down on that. And that's why in recent projects, I write the core melody and then I get an orchestrator and sometimes multiple orchestrators. I'll get copyists to do sheet music. I'm great at sheet music, but I don't like it. I'll get a conductor. I'm okay at conducting, but there are people who love it and like live for that. And here's another one I've learned recently. This is like year 16 in the making right now, which I never thought I would do this in my life. I've always recorded my own instruments. I play violin. I've played different string instruments. I play guitar and bass, whatever. And I've always recorded my own parts. But the day that I started recording other people whose sole favorite instrument is that one thing, like a super elite guitarist, an elite violinist, changed my perspective completely because the projects have been elevated. And the coolest part, as I increase in my craft as a composer, I can charge higher rates, which means I can get a higher budget for the production. And now I can pay a violinist or a cellist or whoever, I can pay them, I don't know, a 100th of the price of the budget to do their little piece. They're going to do it with mastery. It's going to elevate the entire production. And all I have to do is, it doesn't cost me any time. So I'm trading their time for dollars because they love it. So that's a huge tangent there, but the idea is pretty simple. Say yes to projects that inspire you, but in the situations where you get yourself in a pickle and you don't love it, like right now, I'm going to highly, highly encourage you to hire out an assistant composer, someone who loves ambient music, because I promise, I hope you're getting paid for this. Are you getting paid for this project, or is it a free project? Okay, good.
I am getting paid. He paid me up front too, which is
that's good. Yeah. I would set aside 20% of what you got paid and I would hire an assistant composer. That's what I would do in your situation. Because the frustration that you're experiencing will show in the music. There's no way around it.
Mhm.
And the time that you're going to save and the relationships you're going to build by having help is going to change your world. And it doesn't matter that you're at the beginning of your career. Who cares? I feel like I'm still at the beginning of my career. Other people don't think so, but it's all perspective. It's all perspective. And honestly, any chance that you can get to work with other musicians, to me, is very inspiring. Collaborating with other musicians and bouncing ideas back and forth is always so great. So I don't know what arrangement you can make with the developer, but perhaps it's a situation where you write the melodies or you write the core idea. If it's not melodic, fine. But then you can get the other person to flesh it out and to really put their spin and style on it. And you never know. You might even get a budget increase, or if you never know what you can get if you ask. And there's been so many times in my career where I've just had a conversation with a developer. Hey, you hired me for this. I'm going to deliver on this. I'm going to meet all your expectations. But why not become a project manager for this? It's going to help the entire project and it'll be more inspiring. At least I think so.
Yeah. No, I've definitely noticed that, like, even in quarantine, I kind of like hit the ground running with like a ton of different skills that I wanted to build on because I'm trying to get into this video game world. So I kind of did I started doing art classes and I started doing programming classes and then I started doing music. And I kind of like saw that idea that you're preaching of like, I was starting from like negative 100 in terms of art. So like I started at a terrible place and I spent a lot of time and I like just started looking at it and like I could put time and energy into building up this weakness, but it doesn't seem worth it because at the end of the day, if I put those efforts and energy into something like music that is more natural, it seems like it would be a lot more beneficial in the end. So I'm totally seeing that, and that kind of makes sense even to a more specific point of within music, kind of taking on jobs that are just gonna, if I'm making 40 minutes of music that I'm not good at, like I'm building a weakness, but it would be a lot more beneficial to put those 40 minutes of music into something that builds a strength. So that totally makes sense.
Another piece of advice with that is when you're negotiating the budget or when you're saying what the price is to the developer, and if they're asking you to do something that you're not super skilled at, you really have two options. You can hire someone with you, right, who can help with their strengths, or you could even toss it to another composer. But I understand at the beginning stages, you're like, money's everything. And like, you really want to build, you want the credits, you want those experiences, which is fine. So I think if you're going to take that first option, when you're negotiating the price, just include that in there. Literally bump it up 20% higher than you think you should. And now mentally, you've set aside what your rate is and you get a friend to help you. You're helping their career and it just becomes such a synergetic, beneficial experience for everybody. But man, I've just done that. I've done that for an entire year now. And now that I'm on the other side of it, I will never go back because working with other musicians is too much fun. And the end product is always so much better than anything I can make by myself.
Totally. I even noticed that it's kind of the same beast, I guess, like hiring just an artist for video game cover, like kind of working with them and sharing the ideas. It's like, it's not the same exact thing, but it's kind of the same world of like artists trying to make it. It was fun. Like we're talking about it and getting like the idea of the picture. It was like, I'm paying this guy and like, I am actually liking paying him because it's like something we're both kind of working on, a field we're both in. So that's a cool suggestion, trying to get more musicians involved. If I wanted to start doing film composing and I started throwing things on Spotify and I started getting kind of a following, like what does the next step look like? How do I start making cold calls and starting to reach out to people? Like where do I look, I guess?
Specifically for film?
If that makes sense. Film or TV, I guess, because I guess I have kind of a foot in the TV world and it's just kind of a wait and see type of thing. So maybe film. Yeah.
Well, the film industry is very close-knit. It's very location-based. It's very geographical versus game music, which is online. It's everywhere. It's worldwide. So film is much more in-person conversations. It's a little bit slower of a process. What I've noticed is the biggest difference of those two industries is game music, you have a very quick conversation, you get hired immediately, and then you have this really long period of time to work on the project. Sometimes like a year or 2 or 3. It just depends on the size of it. Conversely, when you have film, typically people need music yesterday and the film releases in 2 weeks, right? Or in a month. It's completely different. It's this speedy thing. And the only way you get those projects, because they're so fast and they need someone, it's such a leap of faith to hire a film composer, because you have this budget you've already set aside as a director, but you're trying to hire someone who can't make mistakes. They don't have time for revisions. Yeah. They don't have time to experiment. It has to be done now, and that's just the nature of that industry. So the real question here is not how do you get film projects, but how do you get in the phone of the film director? Because what's going to happen, and I've done this as well. This is my life now that I'm hiring a lot of people. If I need something done that I don't have time for, the first thing I do is I go through my list of contacts, and typically there's 2 or 3 people in my mind. I send them a text and I'll say, hey, you got 5 minutes to talk. You interested in a hire for orchestration or whatever? And the first person who calls me back gets the job. It's literally a speed race. It has nothing to do with qualifications, has nothing to do with their abilities or past experience or credentials or anything else, which literally means that as long as they're in my phone, that they're a viable option. And that might sound trite, and it is, but that's just the nature of networking, as we call it. Because essentially, I have a short list at all times of a handful of people in kind of each field that I'm ready to hire when it's time. And then when it's time, I need you today, or at the very latest tomorrow. And we're gonna work really hard and fast and get it done, because I have deadlines, you have deadlines. And that's exactly how film directors think. They need someone now, and they're going to call whoever answers first. Or maybe they're starting off, they're younger and they don't have a lot of past experience. Probably what they're going to do is they're going to ask their senior friends, people who've been doing it for a while, hey, who do you recommend? The first or second person they recommend, they're going to call. So it's this really close-knit thing. So that's really the question you have to ask yourself. How do I get to be at that level of trust? And I think you're already doing it with your online side by just being you and being real and being open. So there's 2 factors to this. Number 1, do people know that you're a film composer? If not, how will you ever get asked, right? Number 2, totally. When was the last time you talked with a director, right? And if you're not already friends with directors, you won't get hired, because no one Googles for film composers. It's a totally different industry. Yeah. It's not let me go hire a plumber, first one that comes up who lives near me. It's not like that. Film is much more, who do you recommend? Because it's an art, right? Who do you recommend type of industry. So that's why for film, you really got to be at meetups. You got to be at screening events, any kind of local physical event. Or maybe the second best thing is if there are conferences near you. Third best thing might be any kind of group that meets regularly, or a Facebook group, or anything where film directors actually are. Again, totally different than game, which is why you got to be very careful about global advice. Doesn't really apply to everything, but it's just totally different. Does that make sense? Is that helpful?
No, yeah, that's very helpful. And I think I've gotten a hint from that from other things that you've said. It's more of like that's more of like a personal relationship you got to build. The correct director buddies, talking to other director buddies. Who'd you get for this film? Their music was great.
Yep.
What's their contact kind of thing? So that makes sense. Just starting to, it's a little hard with the whole COVID thing going on, but start getting in person and talking to people and building those relationships.
Yep. And
that makes sense.
Final thought on that. This season is very special because, like you just said, no one can meet. And I think that has put a very interesting advantage for anyone that's willing to take advantage of the opportunity. So what that means is now that everyone is online, you literally have access to everybody. And it's no longer the closed door of you had to be there at the event. So I don't know what that means to you, but to me, that sounds like an invitation to reach out to people and maybe to have a Zoom conversation.
Yeah.
Or I mean, even in this season, I've had more access to A-list composers than ever before because they're all home. And everyone in every industry is seeking human interaction, as silly as that sounds. Like, this is a treat for me, just getting to talk with other people, you know? And every time I get to talk with composers and because no one is doing it. It's like we're all shut in and our lives are locked down, and it's been a long time, and people love community. And
Yeah.
I would just encourage you, take full advantage of that because it's right in front of you. It's at your fingertips and it's free. That's the craziest part. You don't have to go spend $400 for a film conference because chances are, if there is a film conference that you'd be interested in, it's probably meeting online anyway for like $30 or something. You know, there's a lot of conferences that are doing that now. Take advantage. I think it's, you're gonna have to be creative, but that's where you get to shine. That's why I don't have any specific advice on that. Because you have to be uniquely you. So whatever you're doing, keep going. But you got to let those two things. You got to let the world know that you're a film composer, and you got to be in the world, in the space that film people are hanging out, which is all online right now. So take advantage.
That's good stuff, man.
That's all the time that we have for today. But I appreciate you, Daniel.
Yeah.
I hope that this is helpful.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. This has been extremely valuable.
So glad to hear that, man. Well, hope you have a great rest of the day, and I will talk with you soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Steven.